Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're looking at Longwinter. This is a setting created by Luca Reyes, who's the author of Ultraviolet Grasslands and Witchburner, which we just looked at recently. So this is a full setting with lots of different locations, towns, cities, mountains to climb, and you get to explore it all. It comes in a visitor's book and a referee's book. You can actually give the visitor's book to your players so that they can read it and gain information and come up with plans as to what they want to do. Here is the back of our books. And before we get started though, quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Into the AM and their series of fantasy and sci-fi themed t-shirts. Today I'm wearing one of the World Tree being devoured by the World Serpent, which seemed like an appropriate shirt for the dark, cold Longwinter book that we're looking at today. Into the AM has a deal coming up for Black Friday, where from the 22nd all the way through the 29th, they will be having a 20% off store-wide deal on all of their t-shirts. And then if you use my link down in the description below, you can get an additional 10% off. All right, thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to the show. Let's start out by looking at the visitor's book. This is a paperback book. It looks like the pages are glued in there, but each signature is also bound because you can see stitching when you come to the middle of one of the signatures. Can't find a good place to see it, but there are stitching in there, so it is going to hold together quite well. Unfortunately, just like the Witchburner book, it doesn't stay open very well, so you do have to kind of hold it open. That's just the way it is. All of the art is done by Luca, so has this very coherent style to it. Lots of great evocative writing. So this takes place in a alpine-like setting. So he says to imagine it's kind of like the Alps in the 20s or 30s. So although it is a fantasy setting, it does have things like skiing and you have old-fashioned cars and stuff like that blended together with the fantasy. I really like that combination. I think it works really well. Reminds me a little bit of other settings like Porco Rosso, for example, the Studio Ghibli movie. Some reasons to visit. So this is like a visitor's guide. So imagine that you're actually a tourist visiting this charming, quaint little alpine area. So here's some reasons you might want to go here. The Barony of Brezim is the name of the place. We have a map. Let's see if we can open it up here. It's done in a topographical style, which I really like. The three main cities, or the three main towns, Rudvi, Gomeli, and Vreli are there. And we also have some smaller villages or hamlets scattered around. We can see where all the main mountains are. Those all get descriptions, where all the rivers are, the forests. And we can see these roads here have numbers on them. This says 1/2. That means it's going to take half of a watch because time is divided into watches, 4 watches per day. There are 6 hours each, which would mean that to go from here to here is half a watch, so 3 hours. Other places are longer, like from here to here is a full watch. Start off with a survey of the land and the history. And going back in time, starting with what's going on today, there is a federation. The Common Congress of Cities and Provinces is strong and stable. A generation ago, you had the Empire. Barely remembered by the eldest, you had an old republic. Then you had a kingdom before that. And then the older times and the oldest times, the forgotten past, legend, and myth. So these are things that might possibly have been true. They're just rumors at this point, or myths. For example, in the Forging era, the Dark took away another half of all humans. Alas, the gates of the former afterlife were closed, and those dead were lost. The government and the people of the area, the Baron, who is part of a democratic autocracy. The Vizier, the Mayors, the Federal Faith, the Baronial Faith. All of these characters get portraits, which is really nice. You can actually show something to your players so they know what people look like. And most of the people in the area are divided between baronials and old settlers. Baronials being the more upper class populace and the old settlers being the common folk who are often looked down upon. Each of these has a series of 10 stories about them that people say. Whether these are true, whether they're not true, that's really going to be up to you. Luca really does focus on these settings that are not super prescriptive. They don't force you into one particular way of looking at things. He definitely encourages you to mix and match things up. This guide may not be completely accurate. You could easily tell your players that this was written by some people back in the Empire, and that now that you're visiting it, maybe not. It's not entirely accurate. Maybe you'll find discrepancies in here. The wolf folk, they're really wild people living out in the woods. So some stories about them could be things like, there's no difference between the wolf folk and the old settlers. Every old settler reverts if let off of their leash. or perhaps they can speak to wolves and bears and foxes. Old architects, these aren't really in the setting. They're just rumored ancient beings that were here perhaps thousands of years ago. Maybe they're aliens. The economy and society, how things are kept up. We have mining, lumber, water, wool, manufacture. So you get a sense of what people are going to care about. The powerful few and the powerless multitudes. Again, I love the pictures of the technology here. The culture and faith of the area, polite address. I really like this. This is a very distinct way of doing this. So a gentle traveler will address those of the highest status in the third person, not speaking directly at them. After a series of platitudes and flatteries, they may address someone of equal status by their title and eventually, possibly even their name. Most outsiders, that could be you, will have a guide to address the lower orders for them. When this is not the case, a visitor may refer to inferiors simply with we, assuming them as part of their own body social. So the class system is baked into the language that's used. Local color, lots of weird little traditions that you can dot around in the different villages and towns. For example, bonfire beds. The old folk build them on exposed ridges at solstices for the firebringer, avatar of sun and sky. They celebrate this dangerous and loving deity by jumping through flames and walking across coals. This ritual brings virility. A whole bunch of different customs here. I love that because it makes things a little bit stranger. You feel a little bit more disoriented because you have to deal with the way that the cultures work. The three main towns here, Gamali is a fortress, and it breaks down a whole bunch of different major locations here. And then the tiered town, the locations there. Almost all of these include a specific NPC with just a short little description. For example, equestrian statue. The Baron and Warlord Ivan Greencorner, founder of Brezim. Note the sensuous lips, the proud ears. Well, that's a statue. But you can also have more particular people, like the ruler, Vizier Ibrahima Falconsbrood of the Federalist Falconsbroods, cosmopolitan and well-traveled. Brezim could want no better ruler. So no matter where you go, you're going to probably find someone to talk to with just enough of a personality and description to make them stand out in the player's minds. A couple of the other towns, Rudvi, same deal here. These all get really nice descriptions. I like how they look like travel posters. And the 8 villages. So is there 8 villages? I think so. Yeah, there's about 8 villages, these yellow circles scattered around here. Each of them has like a mayor. This one has a mayor, a chapel, a foaming giant inn that you can visit. I like how every one of these main headings has a couple short little descriptions here so you get a sense of the whole right off the bat. So this is a growing market village and has prehistoric walls. This one is a petite bucolic village, living wood wall. The art, as I mentioned before, is just fantastic. It would be nice if you had the PDF of this. You could perhaps blow up each of these pictures and make them larger for players. So whenever they go to a new location, they can see what it looks like. Another really great feature here is that all of the mountains, and there's a whole bunch of mountains because it is a Alps-like area. Each of the mountains has its own unique description. What does it look like? What are some unique features of it? So that if you want to go mountain climbing, you're going to have a different experience for each of the mountains. So for example, Dragonberg is the heart of the barony, forested flanks, a small glacier. There is gold dust in the Draga River, and panhandlers are a common sight. Do not ascend too high to appreciate the quaint folkways, for the Draga flows from Dragon's Hole, home of the barony dragon. Giant's Fist, Greyberg, Icegraben, Motherberg, they all have really great names. Rivers and lakes also get their own unique descriptions. This is the sort of thing that you rarely see in gazetteers of fantasy landscapes, where even the rivers have unique properties. So when you visit a particular river, it'll have a personality all of its own. For example, this river, the Cherenka River, has peaty water and a heavy smell. It's dark and grim. The wild waters offer exciting finds for natural philosophers. The beaver dams, waterlogged swamps, and deep pines hide many botanical and zoological treasures. So you can find a lot of beavers there. And that goes on for each of the different rivers that you can explore. We have some game rules here. Yes, this is a book for players, but it does include some rules, summaries of the setting, and even stuff like encounter tables. The rationale here being that if you were a visitor to this setting, or if you're making a guidebook for this setting, the typical types of creatures and encounters that you would have would be generally known. So there's no reason why players couldn't know that. How time is broken down in the game from minutes to hours to watch to a day to a week. Distance is time. So depending on the kind of travel that you're taking, the kind of road is going to affect how long it takes to get somewhere. If you want to go off one of these roads and take a shortcut, you have to roll a d6 and it's going to dramatically extend your travel time. So this map and travel in this setting is basically like a point crawl. We're going from one major location to another. We have different types of paths here. Beast ways, it's a narrow trail, ill-maintained and more used by beasts than humans. A hunter way, a narrow trail kept in good condition by the local hunter society. And so each of these, so from this is most impassable all the way up to most easily traveled. There's going to be different conditions for each of those. Encounters for summer and autumn. This assumes that you're going to be traveling to the area in summer or autumn when the temperature is fairly mild, but it is a pretty cold place. You do want to pack clothing. Encounters could be things like a forest spirit, a wild boar, gnome monkeys, old folk, baronial people, or even just interesting features like a wonderful spot, a panorama, or some delicious berries. Terrain and weather. So the different terrain features are broken down by terrain type. So if you're in an ice field, a mountain, a forest, or a river, you can roll a d20 and find an interesting feature there. So if you're traveling through an area like that, the Game Master can throw natural obstacles at you. Mishaps, so whenever a character rolls a 13 during a physical check, I like that rule, that's very clever, including in combat, you can throw a mishap at them. And again, this is broken down by the type of terrain that you're in. Survival and inventory, you want to pack warm clothes. There is a, let's see, there it is, it's over here. There is a section on recovering from cold, and the more warm clothes that you pack, the more cold you can resist. So there's 5 levels of cold. So if you want to be able to resist like a level 4 Siberian level of cold, you need to have at least 4 warm clothes on, which is going to take up inventory space. Because this does use item-based inventory. It's based on Luca's system, which is called CCAT, which is still under development. We saw a preview of that in Ultraviolet Grasslands. And you need to pack things like meals, how much armor does how much space does your armor take up, weapons, survival gear, lamps. All of this stuff is going to be necessary if you're going to go exploring, if you're going to go off paths, if you're going to be climbing mountains. How short and long rests work, including different tables for how well you've rested depending on the location that you're in. So most of the time you're going to be rolling on this table to see how well you rested. But if you are in like a luxurious spa, perhaps you would roll on this one and you can have really great benefits from resting. But if you're like curled up in a hole under a tree somewhere, then you might roll on this one. Just generally how cold works. We have an inventory sheet that you can use and a barony buy and sell section. So if you want to go shopping, it's designed a little bit like a newspaper, which is fun. Sporting supplement, if you want to go hunting in the region, different guns and weapons that you can find there. And a little bit of fiction at the very back, which you can read. Luca is a great prose writer. It's very evocative, and it really gets you into the headspace for running a game like this. And for the players too, what it would be like to be there. And it has a music of Longwinter. I like how a lot of his books include musical supplements that you can play on YouTube or on Spotify to get in the mood while you're playing the game. So that is just the player's guide, but then the twist occurs when you, as the game master, use the referee's book, because then you figure out what this adventure is actually about. So if you want to, you can have the players arrive in the summer or autumn and just have a fairly normal adventure there, exploring the towns, the local people, maybe fighting some monsters if you find any, exploring, climbing a mountain, things like that. But if they hang around, you can spring on them the Longwinter. So once you get into late autumn and into winter, what you find out is that a curse has been laid upon the land. Basically, there is a goddess, Winterwhite, who long ago made a deal with the people of the area where they had to sacrifice their children to her. However, the people have stopped doing that. And as a result, this winter will be a perhaps never-ending winter, or a winter that will last for an entire year as it becomes colder and colder, slowly freezing the entire region and locking you in. So are you going to be able to survive becomes the real question as things get more and more dangerous. Are you going to be able to find resources, food, light, shelter as winter closes in? And finally, the question could become, are you going to be able to escape? Because all of the roads become clogged with avalanches and ice flows, and there is a mini game in here that players can use to see if they can escape the region. Portents of winter white. So as we approach the end of autumn, you can start rolling on this table perhaps to get some interesting portents of this impending ice age that is about to beset the region. For example, dead leaves crumble to snow or clouds freeze in place. Lots of different factions that we're going to be investigating in this icy hell. He often refers to this setting as not a sandbox, but an ice box, which I think is clever. We have Winter White, the goddess herself. What happens if you anger her? What happens if you listen to her? You can move along these tracks. The Baronials themselves, they could be growing stronger or facing setbacks. So you can slowly evolve what all these different factions in this setting are doing as time goes by, because you are tracking time over the course of several months. The Old Settlers, again, growing stronger or facing setbacks. So as they grow stronger, they can move all the way up to a gun factory or cache is captured. The purges become more savage. Captured baronials are given a taste of their own medicine and enslaved. Moderate old settler chiefs are murdered at the event later remembered as the Bloody Breakfast. So the old settlers, like the lower folk who are often oppressed by the upper classes, can grow stronger and perhaps start a revolution. The wolf folk, the wild people out in the woods, also have their own tables. The old architects, the legendary alien-like beings, have their own tables as well. Days of white snow and red ice. So Longwinter covers 100 days, about 3 months in change, that take the barony of Brezim from late autumn to the dark year of Winter White's curse, when the sun is obscured until the solstice returns again. We have the map once again, but instead we now have several maps. We have the map of summer, which I believe is the same one or very similar to the one that we have in the visitor's book. But then we also have one for winter, where things are changed dramatically. All the main locations are still there, but especially what you'll notice is that a lot of the roads are gone. And the time it takes to get from one place to another have increased. So you can actually show that on the map without having to create a lot of mechanics for it. It's just going to be longer to go from here to here. Everything's going to be more dangerous. We have some encounters. See, this is November in autumn. We have the 30 days right here. You can either roll a d30 to see what the weather is like and what the night weather is like and any events are there. Or, which I think is a little bit more fun, you can just march through this one day at a time over the course of those 30 days. So you always know what's going to be happening next. Encounters in autumn, you can roll a d100 table. There's also going to be encounters for winter where things are much more deadly. The encounters are a lot more dangerous. You're going to encounter higher level monsters. This doesn't include actual stats for these particular monsters, but it does include their level, which is essentially their hit dice. So you can use that to calculate at least their general stats by finding monsters in a monster manual that have similar hit dice. Usually they're going to get a +1 to attack for each hit die. So that's a good baseline to use. By the time you get to December, you have things like sun hazy veils, or the cool steady chill breeze, powder falls steadily, all the way up to a howling blizzard, a laughing blizzard, cold snap, small rivers freeze. The number at the end of each of these is the cold level, with 5 being the most terrible. And at night, of course, it can get even colder. I love the very short but very evocative descriptions of the weather. They're all different, so you can always give a very fun description to the players. Days of deep winter. So once a deep winter hits, things get really bad. Now you're in January and you're going to be hitting nights where the cold level is 5 a lot more regularly. So these are nights that can straight up kill you unless you have a lot of warmth and shelter. Some things that you can find: a body in the snow, a cache under the ice, an ancient vault, memories of summer. And we have the escape system. So once the winter really starts setting in, the locals are going to start telling the players in no uncertain terms, this is not normal. Things are getting scary. Eventually, the players are going to figure out that we're in a magically induced icebox and they're going to want to escape. The way that that works is that it uses a deck of cards. There's a card mechanic here. So I'll pull out a deck of cards here so I can show you what I mean. Most of this book is what each of these cards mean. And there is a location at the top describing a place that you can go. There is an event there, and there's also a possible person that you encounter as well. So the basic system is that you have a deck of cards, and whenever you want to travel, you flip over 3 of those cards. So we've got an ace of clubs, a 2 of diamonds, and a 5 of hearts. And each of these represents a particular place. It would be better, and he admits this in the book, if the cards themselves had the place description written on them. But since that doesn't really exist right now, what you can do is just read what each of these places mean by looking them up in the book. Players decide which place they want to go to, and you would just mark that. So let's say they want to go to this place, whatever that is. And whatever card is left on the left side can become the event that happens there, and the other one can become the character that you find there. Or perhaps it's the other way around. Anyway, so if you go to the same place over and over, you're going to be having different events and characters because it's not all going to depend on one card. And then if they manage to actually reach this place and explore it, then the players can collect this card while these other ones get discarded into the discard pile. You want to collect the cards because in order to escape this region, you need to create the correct set of cards. You're either looking for 4 cards that are all of the same suit in a row, so like a 2 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, or alternately, you are looking for 3 of a kind, for example, 3 kings. So as the players collect these cards, you're trying to make these sets. So you're going to be looking at the cards that are out, and that's going to help inform what place you're going to go to so you can build these sets. As the cards have higher numbers, that generally means that they are more dangerous. Lower numbers are a little bit easier. Jokers can be wild and have all sorts of crazy effects. As you rest or build shelters or explore, you're going to be adding to the misfortune pile. So you'll be pulling cards off and adding them to a pile. The first card doesn't really do anything, but whenever you add a card to the misfortune pile that is lower than the one that is already there, so for example, in this case, that would trigger the misfortune there. And you would use the challenge and the NPC found on that particular card, you would just look it up in the back, to help generate what that misfortune is. Then you would recycle this back again. So if you're hanging out a lot, if you're resting a lot, building shelters a lot, misfortunes are going to pile up. The way to avoid misfortunes is to travel as much as possible, but that also means that you're going to be getting worn out. You'll be consuming food, you'll be getting exhausted, you'll be encountering dangers, and so forth. Let's look at a few examples here. For example, the ace of clubs, an abandoned lookout. So the location here, if this card was out, would mean the mule road snakes along the rugged mountain flank. Dark fir forests rise above, cliffs and tumbled rocks collapse into torrents below. A blackened bunker complex, dusted in snow, keeps dead-eyed watch atop an outcrop. The road continues through a tunnel carved beneath. Ambushers and defenders are advantaged. It's easy to avoid the worst of the weather here. So you could also roll an encounter if you wanted to see if there's anything else here. The event or the challenge here is spilled grain, so perhaps you're losing some resources. The sack did its best to hold the grain, but step after weary step, and another few grains tumbled down. Now, after a watch's walking, the sack is empty. So you can perhaps go back and pick up the spilled food, but you're going to lose another watch. And there's a cautious patrol, the NPC you can find here. 2 baronial soldiers in padded greatcoats, armed with walking spears and lead splitters. Both are also decked with holy stones of the 3 avatars. Braid Icewinkler and Dale Everloyal. So just to clarify again, these things aren't necessarily things that are going to happen at this place. You would use these events when you picked a different card. So whenever you're choosing a location, you're not only picking where you want to go to try and complete your set of cards, but you're also looking at the kinds of events and NPCs that you would find on the other cards. Because if those happen to be low cards, you'd know they'd be easy, and if they're high, they'd probably be hard. So it becomes a complex balancing act of picking exactly the right place to go. I like that. So there's some real strategy there. All of the different suits represent a different type of thing. So the clubs are forests, forest and brush, resource challenges, and natural characters. Whereas if we go up to hearts are rivers. They represent valley bottoms, water, social challenges, sometimes helpful characters. While spades are mountains, slopes, physical challenges, and dangerous characters. And then lastly, we have diamonds, which are locations on high ice, supernatural challenges, and terrifying characters. So you're going to get a wide variety of stuff to encounter here. And of course, if you don't want to use this whole mini game, you can easily just steal all of these ideas and then plop them around in the setting for players to encounter. Finally, we get to the jokers at the very back. You can leave those in the deck. And then the escape itself. You can score your escape by looking at the set of cards that you collected. Generally, the higher value of the set, the better your escape is going to be. And that is it. So Longwinter, you can either use it just in the summer mode and just have players explore a quaint alpine area, or turn it into a terrifying icebox mode where they are exploring and trying to survive, perhaps using that little mini game. As usual, I'll put links down in the description below for where you can pick this up for yourself if you are so inclined, in PDF or in print form. And thank you for watching. See you guys next time.